do you feel a little bit better about the Preds getting swept in round one now that it happened to the Edmonton Oilers? We'll talk about that. Plus, should Preds fans cheer for the Colorado Avalanche in the finals? Should they go all in on the bandwagon to make themselves kind of feel a little bit better about the way the season ended? And more general playoff talk coming up today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
Your Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day every single day. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer and editor at ontheforecheck.com, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at ontheforecheck.com.
Well, the Preds and the Edmonton Oilers have something in common now.
They do.
In case you missed it last night, the Colorado Avalanche, aka the Preds' first round opponents, I'm sure you all remember. They're moving on to the Stanley Cup Finals thanks to a wild 6-5 overtime win in Game 4 last night. Their first Stanley Cup Finals appearance since 2001. And I think the Colorado Avalanche might be pretty good at hockey.
Yeah, I think that they're doing okay. And Game 4 was absolutely bat poop crazy. It was in Edmonton. If you all didn't watch it, it was in Edmonton. And so just the energy highs and lows there throughout this game was just an emotional roller coaster. You know, the Avs won it in overtime, 6-5. There were 6 goals scored in the third period.
This is just your standard Edmonton Oilers playoff game.
Yeah, it was insane. And, you know, the Avs just continued to roll. Their scoring came from, 6 different players. They really did a great job for the most part containing Edmonton. Edmonton did not want to lose this game. It kept going back and forth. You know, the Avs had the lead early, 1-0 after the first. The Oilers came back in the second and had 3-1 lead after the second. I mean, the place is rocking. Connor McDavid is smiling.
And
everybody
then they fell apart.
And then the third period and the Colorado Avalanche happened. And, you know, the Avs came out in the third period. They scored with like less than a minute into the period, and it just began to roll. And it was an edge of your seat hockey game in the third period because you just had no idea what the hell was going to happen next. It was craziness.
Yeah, it was akin to a blockbuster movie almost.
Yes.
Like there are so many twists and turns, but it was kind of one of those mind F blank 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 kind of films where it's just you legitimately had no idea how it was going to end. Like, you know, some big name movies, you can kind of see the ending in sight. You know what the end point's going to be. You just don't know how they're going to get there. But this, I mean, legitimately had no idea who was going to come out on top. You know, after the second intermission, I thought, you know, the Oilers have this. You know, they found their mojo.
Yes.
And then once the Avalanche came back and took that lead late, I was like, there's no way. Like, there's no way Edmonton's coming back from this.
Yeah.
And then they did. And so it was just kind of like this wild, you know, back and forth. And it's crazy. And, you know, it kind of goes to show you how good the Avalanche have been, where they've kind of now for the third series in a row beaten their opponents at their own game, so to speak. You know, they made, you know, the Predators series, you know, a very fast, you know, kind of physical, strong forechecking,
right?
Not let the Predators breathe kind of series. They went to St. Louis, made it, you know, a very big defensive shutdown, you know, not really letting the, you know, the Blues get a chance to score. And then they went to Edmonton last night and just racked up the goals against them, which is how Edmonton has beaten teams all season long.
Mhm.
So it just kind of goes to show you the depth this Colorado Avalanche team has, where they've kind of played 3 completely different looking
Mhm.
series and have won the series kind of in 3 different distinct ways.
Yeah. And they're playing with so much confidence. And of course, it helps when you're in the Western Conference Finals. You're going to be confident. But there was no point in this series. And honestly, there's been no point for the Avalanche in the postseason where they have played back on their heels. Even in some of the closer games, when Nashville lost in overtime in game 2. Even then, Colorado just plays in control of the games that they're in, and they are playing with so much confidence. And I agree with you. They are, there's just not a weakness in their style of hockey. They have a lineup that can sort of adjust their play based on what's needed against which opponent. And for them to come out in the third period and tie that game up and take it to overtime, this is a team that's rolling. I don't know who's going to stop them. I just don't know who can stop them.
Yeah. There's one of the 2 teams left in the Eastern Conference Finals that I think would stop them.
Perhaps.
That's a different conversation, I think, for a different episode. Mm-hmm. Here's the $1 million question, Anne.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in Preds verse.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen how the Avalanche have played this postseason. They've only lost 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel looking back on that first round series now?
It makes me, of course, just instantly feel a little bit better because the Edmonton Oilers are, just a ridiculously strong offensive team, 2 of the best players in the league, and they ended up getting swept. But when I went and kind of dug into some numbers, I felt even better about it, because Colorado handled the Oilers in very similar way to the Predators. The Predators lost to the Avalanche in 4 games in a very similar way that Edmonton did. In the Oilers series, the score was 22-13 goals in favor of the Avalanche. The Preds series was 21-9 in favor of the Avalanche. So it wasn't like the Predators weren't producing some offense. It wasn't like, they were blown out. But the Avalanche have been able to just contain offensive threats, whether it's with Nashville, whether it was with St. Louis, whether it's with the Oilers. Draisaitl and McDavid, not huge numbers. Now, Evander Kane was a whole thing, but he sat out. He sat in the press box and watched his team eliminated from the playoffs. So that's a moment.
I can hear the pettiness in your voice right now.
I am a little petty. Yep, I am. But, the Avalanche did the same thing, I think, with Forsberg and Duchesne. It's like they look at, okay, who do we need to shut down? And they're very good at containing them. And so there are a lot of similarities in the way they swept the Oilers and the way they swept the Predators. And in theory, we can dive into this, but in theory, you could say that the Predators could have made it to the 3rd round and been eliminated by the Avalanche, just like the Oilers did.
Well, that's an interesting theory. I kind of want to dive into that in just a second, and kind of want to give my takes on whether I thought the Predators maybe played better than the Edmonton Oilers. But first, want to mention today's show is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar, who have a new flavor out, Anne.
Oh, come on.
Caramel brownie. Don't you just love a chewy, chocolatey brownie? Well, what about a brownie with caramel swirled on top? And what if I told you can have all of that goodness plus 17 grams of protein? Well, you're in luck because caramel brownie bars are now available at built.com, and you got to act fast because they're a fan favorite. You don't need dessert when you have these. These are better than dessert. Plus, the macros are unreal. 130 calories, 17 grams of protein, and only 4 grams of sugar. Yeah, you can pretty much replace a regular brownie with Built Bar brownies, and they taste just as good. And hey, it's a protein bar. I get it. But that doesn't mean it's not tasty. Caramel brownie bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. You don't have to sacrifice tasty for healthy with Built Bars. You can have both. Plus, they're made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides other wonderful health benefits. So there are a million reasons that you should try Built Bars. But for now, let's just say that caramel brownie will rock your world. That's not an understatement. Go to built.com right now and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com to get your box of caramel brownie bars now. That sounds absolutely delicious, and now I am hungry. And let's go back to kind of the discussion you brought up a second earlier, and that is, let's say the Predators didn't blow that game to the Arizona Coyotes.
Oh,
Let's say they took on the Calgary Flames.
yes.
Is there a path for Nashville to get to the Western Conference Finals if the roles are reversed, even maybe without UC Saros?
That's a great question. I think the trouble would lie when they run into the Oilers. I don't know. What do you think? How do you think they would have done? Let's play what if.
Well, let's start with the Calgary series.
Yes.
Because it's hard to tell. Calgary didn't look great all postseason. Remember, they had trouble with Dallas. They went to an elimination game with Dallas and had to eke out an overtime win in that one. And you look, Jake Ottinger was playing out of his mind. Who knows what the goaltending situation would have been like for Nashville back then?
Right.
Because, they probably would have started David Riddick. And I'm not sure he is what you needed to win that series. But I do think, the Preds, hey, the way Dallas played against the Flames, the way they really didn't kind of show out at all in the postseason, there is a compelling argument to be made there that the Preds could very easily sneak up on the Calgary Flames, a team they played very well over the course of the season, and at least get to the second round. And then maybe, our viewpoint changes on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the Predators could have handled Calgary better than Colorado right out of the gate. And I think it would have benefited Nashville to have a little bit more time on the ice under their belts instead of just a 4-game sweep right up against Colorado. I think they could have chugged out some better hockey against Calgary, and I think that would have helped them. They just didn't have time to get any postseason traction against the Avs, and I think they could have against Calgary.
Yeah, that takes us on to round number 2, which was Edmonton. That to me, that's more of the sticky wicket,
right?
I think, for the Nashville Predators, because they did not play well against Edmonton this year, and the way that McDavid, Draisaitl, Kane combination was going, and the way Zach Hyman was starting to step up. The defensive sort of woes for Nashville late in the season, I don't know how well you stack up against those three. So that's
where the UC Saros factor, I think, would have been huge. To not have Saros against them would have been a real challenge. Yeah,
I think there's, you're having a very different conversation if UC Saros is in net for the Nashville Predators, because he's kind of the eraser. He's the guy that will go in and erase the team in front of him's bad performance. He did it all of, the 2021 season. Predators had no business being in that postseason last year, and look what happened. And I do think, he easily could have made it a series if the Predators had won that contest against Arizona in sort of, reverse time a little bit, reverse the whole portal.
And what do you think? How do you think the Predators, let's continue down this what if path? Let's just say we had Saros The Predators pull out a 7-game series against the Oilers and then face the Colorado Avalanche. How would that potential pretend series look different than the Colorado Predators series that we had this postseason?
Well,
Like, how do you think it would look?
you even have to go back to the original series and think Colorado versus Predators in round one with Saros, and suddenly that's
Yes.
I do think Colorado still probably pulls that one off, just because I
Mhm.
don't think Nashville could have matched their firepower. And obviously, as we saw, the defense didn't really do a good job of containing the Avs.
Mhm.
And so, you're still relying a lot on UC Saros, but I do think he comes in and steals a couple of games, and then maybe that's a 6-game series.
Mhm.
Maybe that's even a 7-game series.
Yes.
Just based on your goaltender getting really, really hot at the right time. So I think that series is a little bit closer with Saros and net. But after seeing what the Avs did in St. Louis, after seeing what they did against the Edmonton Oilers, I still think it's painfully clear that
Yes.
Nashville was never going to be in that series.
Yes.
Maybe they still a couple games, but I think by far the Avs would have been the better team then and always.
Yeah. And I think it's good that I feel like we can say confidently that the best team in the Western Conference is in the Stanley Cup Finals. And I
Absolutely.
don't think that always happens. But I think without a doubt, the best team in the Western Conference is playing in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah, well, you've kind of had a weird, interesting dynamic the past few years where it's always kind of been this one team that kind of gets hot at the right
Yes.
time. And it sounds like this year might break that. Because
Yeah.
if Tampa gets it, obviously they're the Tampa Bay Lightning, 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions. If the Rangers get in, they're still first place in, their division
Mhm.
for a lot of the year. One of the top teams, the team with the best goaltender in the league right now, and
For
one of the
sure.
most dynamic scorers in Artemi Panarin.
Mhm.
So, either way, you're not getting kind of this underdog story, whoever the
Yes.
Avalanche wind up playing.
Yes.
But it is interesting to kind of look back at the past couple of years, and this is kind of the first time that the front runner in the West has moved on to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yes.
I mean, we've seen it the
Yes.
past couple of years. Remember Montreal was somehow put in the Western Conference last year when all the COVID reshuffling
Yeah.
happened. We had the year before the Dallas Stars in the that play-in
Right.
tournament. In retrospect, kind of a fluky move. Even
Mhm.
the year before that, St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup. I don't think anybody was going into that playoffs penciling
Right.
in the
Calling
Blues
them.
as the best team in the Western Conference.
Yes.
With this, Colorado was penciled in by a lot of people as
Mhm.
not just the Western Conference favorite, but the Stanley Cup favorite. And they met expectations this year. This is the first time in the West you could probably say that about a team.
Well, and I love to see that. Everybody does love the underdog story. Everybody does love they came into the playoffs and magic happened. And, that makes for an interesting story. The problem is it also sets really scary expectations for teams like the Nashville Predators. So I like the idea that we're going to have a Stanley Cup final with two of the best teams in the NHL facing off, where there's not just a how did they get here moment. It's very obvious that you're going to look at the two best teams facing off. And I love that. It may not be the most interesting narrative, but it's going to make for some outrageously good hockey. And I am 100% here for that.
Yeah. All right. So let's go back to Preds Avalanche. Obviously they got knocked out in round one. A little bit of contention
Oh, a
between
little bit?
a lot of different people from both fan bases, maybe a little bit on the players' side as well.
A little
So,
bit?
if you're a Predators fan, Anne,
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
you cheer for the Colorado Avalanche to win it all?
Yeah, this is one I wrestle with in the sense that there was a fat load of steaming snark between the fan bases and the players. Like Colorado and Nashville, there was zero love lost between these two teams in the regular season and into the postseason. And so it's a little hard to overlook some of the past. There is a part of me, though, that is pragmatic enough to say, I would rather say we were swept in the first round by the Stanley Cup champions than to say, the runners up. There's something a little bit soothing about, well, everybody lost to the Colorado Avalanche in the postseason. But it's not, look, cheering for them is not an easy one. Like, it's not an easy get for me. But for me personally, I think pragmatically, let's go, Avs. Like, just finish this. Just finish it. It's like you're watching a boxing match and one guy is just kind of bloody and the other guy isn't quite tired yet. And you're just like, just end him. Just end him. And that's where I feel like we are in the playoffs with the Avalanche. Just end them. And let's call it good. We lost to the Muhammad Ali of the NHL. Okay, that feels better.
You can put a feather in your cap for the season with that. Yeah.
Right. What about you?
Yeah, that's sort of the same debate, isn't it? It's like, hey, do you want to say you were knocked out by the best team in the NHL versus, are you content with seeing a team that, is a division rival, a team that's, kind of getting a little bit spicy on the rivalry scale over the past couple of years or so? Yes. Do you want to see them happy? More or less, that's
Never.
Kind of the debate. That's like the same thing. If the Chicago Blackhawks knocked out the Predators in round one, would anybody cheer for the Chicago Blackhawks to win the Stanley Cup?
Never.
Yeah, I mean, same thing with the St. Louis Blues or Dallas Stars, and Colorado is kind of taping that. It would be fun as hell to see, a team kind of put together in this sort of, high-end action team wind up winning it all.
I think it helps that everybody can look at this Colorado roster that's just obscenely talented and know that the Nashville Predators aren't going to face this same Colorado Avalanche team next season. So it makes it a little bit more palatable to root for the Avs, knowing we do not have to play this exact same roster next year, because this roster is not going to exist for Colorado. And Nashville may look at some of these, there's a couple players on the Avs team that maybe Nashville's going to look at. So I think that makes it slightly more palatable, because this is it for Colorado. They're probably not going to be the same caliber team next season just because of contracts and cap space.
I mean, they're still going to be the Colorado Avalanche, but
for sure,
they're still
but
going
they're
to
not
have
going to be
core. Maybe not with this exact lookup, and they're going to have to make some cap decisions over the next year or so. But I mean, they're still going to be pretty good for quite some time,
right? But they're not going to be this team that swept us. They're not. They're just not. Are they going to be good? Probably. They've got a good core. I would agree with that. I don't think we're going to see this same level of play out of Colorado next season. And so that makes it a little more palatable as a Nashville Predators fan to say, okay, I can give them this one. They can have one happiness, 1 year of happiness.
I think it also kind of depends on who they play also, because if they play Tampa, there's probably a lot of people that are going to be cheering for Colorado just to kind of see something different. They don't want, see the same team win 3 years in a row. Whereas, there's varying opinions about New York. I like the New York Rangers. I think they're a fun team. And I think Igor Shesterkin is right now the best goaltender in the league.
Yes.
So, from that end, do you cheer from that? There's also other people that just don't like, the Rangers for, various
just their
reasons.
New York. Yeah,
because they're New York or whatever. So, I think it also kind of depends on who they play and how you feel about Tampa or New York.
Are you going to root for the Avs in the Stanley Cup?
We'll see who they play.
All right.
We'll see who they play.
All right. I'm just in. I'm rolling with it. Like at this point, it's, it feels inevitable to me. I think one team from the East could make it a more interesting series, but I'm just rolling with it. If the Nashville Predators are going to get swept, let's get swept by the Stanley Cup champions and call it a day.
Yeah. Agree to disagree.
Yep, that's true.
We'll, of course, keep tracking the Stanley Cup playoffs throughout the year. We're going to see who the Avalanche wind up playing. Plus, plenty of more Preds talk coming up. We got report cards for Ryan Johansson and Matthias Ekholm coming up. We're going to be talking with some of our Central Division frenemies about their paths this season and what they have coming up this offseason. And we'll get into some NHL draft rankings down the road. Who are some people the Predators could target? Our buddy Eric Dene is going to be helping us with that. So lots to look forward to here in the Locked On Predators podcast. So make sure you're coming back here every single day for a new episode. Until then, Ann, where can the people find your work online?
You can find my work at ontheforecheck.com, and you can find me on Twitter at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
I'm Nick Morgan. You can find me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. Read my work at ontheforecheck.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let us know whether you're going to be cheering for the Colorado Avalanche this postseason in the Stanley Cup Finals. That's going to do it for us on the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with a new episode. We'll see you then.